She would linger, observing him so intently that it sometimes made Suthapong a little flustered. His muscular build, sturdy hands, and confident demeanor seemed to stir thoughts in Nalini's mind that went far beyond admiration. The situation had clearly sparked a storm of emotions and fantasies in Nalini's heart and mind. Hey there, and welcome to our channel. Today, we're diving back into some of the most chilling real-life events happening around the world. This time, our story takes us to Solavan, a region in Laos. Now, here's the thing. So many crimes stem from uncontrollable desires, those inner urges that some people just can't seem to manage. Unfortunately, this can lead to situations where others are forced to satisfy those twisted cravings. The case we're talking about today ties directly into this idea. So, what's the full story behind this disturbing event? Stick around, and let's dive deeper together. Before we dive into the story, let's take a moment to hit that like button, leave a comment, subscribe, and share this tale with your friends. Now, let me tell you about Nalini. Her life is a journey full of twists and turns. Nalini was born in 1971 in Fontan, Laos. She was the second of 4 kids, a brave and adventurous soul who followed her heart wherever it led. After finishing high school, she packed up and moved to Nakaseo to work in a clothing store. It was there that she met a man and tied the knot in 1995. But life wasn't smooth sailing. Their marriage fell apart after just 5 years. They were both unfaithful and wanted different things. They separated without having any children. In 2001, Nalini married again, this time to a widower. She became pregnant twice, but heartbreak followed as both pregnancies ended in miscarriages. Sadly, her husband drifted away, finding comfort in the arms of another woman. By 2004, she was left behind, broken but determined to move on. Seeking a fresh start, she relocated to Solavan, Laos. There, she met a woman named Phelan, who worked at a nightclub. The two quickly became close friends, and Nalini took a job as a waitress at the bar. In 2006, Nalini fell for another man and married him after just 2 months of dating. But history seemed to repeat itself. She got pregnant again, only to face another loss. By 2010, her third marriage ended. Her husband left her for someone else. Through all this heartbreak, only Phelan stayed by her side, her unwavering companion in every storm. Fast forward to 2015, Nalini met a man named Chrysorn, a widower with 2 children who frequented the bar where she worked. Lonely and in need of companionship, Chrysorn found solace in sharing his thoughts with her. They grew close, and by May 2016, with the blessing of his sons, Nalini and Chrysorn were married. At 45, she finally found a stable home with Chrysorn, who was 56 at the time. They moved into Chrysorn's spacious house in Solavan, complete with a garden and backyard. Chrysorn, a plant enthusiast, once owned a landscaping business. Now semi-retired, he runs a small workshop about 7 kilometers from their home. Life in their household is lively. Chrysorn's younger brother, Wurawit, also lives there. At 46, Wurawit spends most of his time managing the workshop. His wife and son live out of town in Moong Tumlan due to a strained relationship. Wurawit is rarely home, leaving early in the morning and returning late at night, completely immersed in work. Another resident in the house is Boonsong, a 35-year-old gardener who looks after Chrysorn's beloved plants. Boonsong's wife, Swada, visits every few days to help with household chores and laundry. Meals are often taken care of by a catering service since Chrysorn follows a special diet to manage his diabetes. After getting married, Nalini settled into the big house and took over almost everything. She managed her husband Chrysorn's meals, clothes, and household chores. Swada, who used to stop by every 3 days to clean, became less welcome. Nalini preferred doing it all herself, and eventually, Swada's visits stopped altogether. Living in the house, Nalini discovered her husband had a significant inheritance and also received monthly transfers from his children in Nakaseo. She decided to open the small workshop, partly to give her brother-in-law, Wurawit, a stable job. The workshop was modest, with only 3 mechanics, and it didn't bring in much income, but it kept things running. However, there was something peculiar about Chrysorn's private life that Nalini uncovered. She learned he had a habit of visiting adult websites and watching explicit shows. At first, she was taken aback, but over time, she adapted. In fact, she even started joining him, and the two would watch together, turning it into a shared experience. For nearly 2 years, this became part of their routine. Even though Nalini wasn't able to have children, Chrysorn didn't seem to mind. He valued happiness and a fulfilling life over everything else. In March 2018, Chrysorn's health took a turn for the worse. His diabetes flared up, landing him in the hospital several times. Back at home, he spent most of his time resting and undergoing therapy. This left Nalini feeling lonely. She found herself watching the adult shows alone, but it wasn't the same. Whenever she tried to be intimate with Chrysorn, he simply didn't have the energy. Things began to shift further in April 2018. Chrysorn's younger brother, Outrage, suddenly decided to move out of the house and live at the workshop. His reason? He claimed it was more comfortable there. This puzzled Chrysorn. The workshop was cramped, noisy, and full of mosquitoes. Hardly a place anyone would willingly choose over a spacious home. Despite his brother's questions, Outrage didn't offer a clear explanation. He only returned to the house when specifically called by Chrysorn. By May 2018, Boonsong, the loyal gardener, started acting out of character too. He used to take excellent care of the garden and even stayed late to help around the house. But now, he frequently left early, often claiming he needed to visit his sick child. His absences became so frequent that Swada, his wife, began covering for him. She took over watering the plants and tidying the yard without much explanation. Chrysorn and Nalini noticed this change and questioned Swada about Boonsong's behavior. But her answers were vague, citing family matters, without providing specifics. This raised suspicions. Boonsong, who had always been dependable, helping with late-night errands, finding medicine for Chrysorn, even missing the birth of his own child to stay by his employer's side, was now behaving differently. Swada didn't elaborate further, choosing instead to quietly handle her husband's duties and avoid stirring up more questions. In July 2018, Nalini joined Chrysorn on a visit to the workshop, and that's when she noticed one of the mechanics, a 23-year-old named Suthapong. He stood out with his polite demeanor and consistent greetings. Despite only finishing junior high school, Suthapong was hardworking and incredibly skilled in automotive repair, earning him a reputation as one of Outrage's go-to mechanics for tough jobs. Nalini couldn't help but admire him, and soon she found reasons to visit the workshop more frequently. When Outrage announced he'd be taking a few weeks off to visit his wife and children in Muang Tumlin, Nalini started dropping by the workshop almost daily, using the excuse of helping her husband keep an eye on things. She watched Suthapong work, noticing every detail: his muscular build, strong hands, even his large toes. Her admiration gradually turned into something more, and she confided in her friend Phelan about the fantasies that began forming in her mind. It didn't help that Chrysorn was still confined to his wheelchair, leaving Nalini feeling increasingly restless and lonely. By September 2018, things took an unexpected turn. Boonsong, the loyal gardener, and his wife, Swada, announced their resignation. They claimed they wanted to return to their village to care for aging parents, but avoided giving a clear reason for leaving. Chrysorn sensed something was off and even asked Nalini if she'd had any conflicts with them. She denied any issues, reassuring him that everything was fine. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that something more was at play. He wondered if there had been an argument between Boonsong and Outrage, or, perhaps, if something supernatural was making the house feel unwelcoming. Nalini brushed off his concerns, telling him not to overthink and focus on his health instead. With no gardener on hand, Nalini suggested asking Suthapong to help with the garden temporarily. Chrysorn agreed, and they offered the young man double his usual salary to spend 1 to 2 hours at the house each morning before heading to the workshop. Suthapong accepted, eager to earn more money, as he was saving up to marry his girlfriend. By October, he moved into Chrysorn's house to make things more convenient. Wurawit often advised him to take it easy and not overwork himself, but Suthapong was determined. His youth and ambition drove him to say yes to every task, even if it meant pushing himself to the limit. Then, on the night of November 16, 2018, everything changed. Around 10 p.m., Chrysorn heard a piercing scream coming from the kitchen, Nalini's voice. Alarmed, he rushed there in his wheelchair and found her lying on the floor, clutching her shoulder, which was bleeding from a wound. Panicked, Chrysorn called out for Suthapong, but there was no response. He immediately called an ambulance and contacted Wurawit to come over. Nalini spent 3 days in the hospital recovering. When she was well enough to speak, she claimed that Suthapong had attacked her that night. She insisted the authorities arrest him. On November 20, 2018, the police went to Suthapong's home. His family greeted them calmly, almost as if they had been expecting their arrival. Suthapong didn't resist or attempt to run. He quietly complied and was taken to the station. Surprisingly, Wurawit accompanied him, standing by the young mechanic and ready to defend one of his most reliable workers. Here's how the story unfolded, based on their confessions. When Nalini moved into Chrysorn's mansion, things started to take a turn. According to Wurawit, she began flirting with him, despite being his brother's wife. Wurawit, however, respected Chrysorn and refused to give in to her advances. Feeling uncomfortable and wanting to avoid conflict, he decided to move out and stay at the workshop. He contemplated telling Chrysorn about Nalini's behavior, but with his brother's health in decline, he feared the stress might worsen his condition. So, he kept it to himself. After the old gardener, Boonsong, resigned, Nalini shifted her attention to Suthapong, the young mechanic. At first, Suthapong firmly rejected her advances. But Nalini came up with a twisted story, claiming that he had to comply as part of a ritual to save the workshop's business. She told him that the place was under the shadow of a black curse that could bring financial ruin. According to Nalini, a spiritual master had decreed that the curse could only be lifted if she performed the ritual act with an unmarried man, Suthapong. Confused and manipulated by her lies, the young mechanic reluctantly gave in. For nearly a month, Nalini coerced him into doing her bidding, all under the guise of this so-called ritual. But over time, Suthapong grew suspicious of the story and felt increasingly trapped. Finally, he confided in Wurawit. This was when everything started to unravel. Wurawit revealed to Suthapong that Nalini's story was almost certainly fabricated. He recounted how she had tried the same tricks on him but failed when he refused to entertain her advances. The two men decided to report the situation to the authorities. Unfortunately, their complaint was dismissed, with the police essentially laughing them off. Without any concrete evidence, their claims were deemed baseless. The officers even questioned how they could prove such allegations, especially in a case like this. Feeling helpless and trapped, Suthapong reached his breaking point. On the night of the incident, Nalini once again tried to coerce him into performing the ritual. This time, the young man snapped. In a fit of rage, he grabbed a kitchen knife and attacked her, leaving her unconscious on the floor with a wound on her shoulder. Panicked, he fled the house and went into hiding at his family's home. He didn't show up for work in the days that followed, but he did send a message to Wurawit, expressing his intention to turn himself in. However, fear got the better of him. Instead of surrendering, Suthapong locked himself in his room and waited. When the authorities arrived at his home on Saturday afternoon, he didn't resist. He quietly allowed himself to be taken into custody. Wurawit accompanied him, prepared to explain the events that had led to that fateful night. The lawyer argued that his client, Suthapong, had acted in self-defense after being pushed to his limits. He pointed out that Suthapong had previously reported Nalini's misconduct, but the authorities dismissed it. The lawyer emphasized how difficult it often is for male victims to have their voices heard in such cases. To strengthen the defense, the lawyer brought in Boonsong, the former gardener, as a witness. Boonsong revealed that he, too, had been targeted by Nalini in the past. After Chrysorn's health began to deteriorate, Nalini fabricated a story, claiming that a ritual involving adult acts with other men was necessary for her husband's recovery. At first, Boonsong complied, but guilt over betraying his wife, Swadda, led him to back out. When he confessed everything to Swadda, she urged him to leave the job, which explained their sudden resignation. Boonsong's testimony, supported by Swadda, was a turning point in the case. It provided a pattern of behavior that matched what had happened to Suthapong. Despite initially denying all allegations, Nalini's defense unraveled when her close friend, Phelan, took the stand. Shockingly, Phelan admitted that Nalini had shared the ritual idea with her, proudly claiming it as a way to manipulate the gardeners. Phelan revealed that after marrying Chrysorn and watching adult movies, Nalini's desires became increasingly insatiable. She began to justify her actions by claiming that it was for the benefit of her husband. When her fantasies with comfort men did not satisfy her, she targeted Boonsong and then Suthapong. Phelan's testimony is supported by WhatsApp messages exchanged between the two friends, which leaves no doubt. In court, Nalini sat in silence as the evidence stacked against her. Phelan, despite knowing she'd lose her friendship with Nalini, chose to speak the truth, feeling sorry for the harm done to Suthapong and Boonsong. The verdict was finally delivered 2 years later, on October 21, 2020, at the Solavan Regional Court. The judge found Suthapong guilty of second-degree assault but acknowledged that it was an act of self-defense. He was sentenced to 4 years in prison, with time served during pre-trial detention, delayed due to the pandemic, deducted from his sentence. Nalini was found guilty of misconduct and lying. At 50 years old, she received a 29-month prison sentence for her actions toward the two gardeners. In a somber turn of events, just 3 months later, in January 2021, Chrysorn passed away at the age of 61 due to his ongoing illness. His death marked the end of a tumultuous chapter for everyone involved, leaving behind a tale of manipulation, betrayal, and consequences that echoed far beyond the walls of their home. What lessons can we learn from this story?